And I've decided to collect them all and put them in this book and give people a real guide, a playbook, if you will, on how they can distance themselves from the stereotypical salesperson that most people can't stand and don't want to be around and become the salesperson people love.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi, and welcome to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske. I'm your host, and today I'm super excited to have the wonderful Rob Cornilles on the show with me. How are you, Rob?
Hey, Rick, I'm well, thank you. And thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Rob. Now, for everybody who doesn't know much about Rob, you soon will. He is the founder and CEO of Game Face Inc., which is his sports and corporate sales training business. He's also the host of the Game Face Execs podcast, and he's author of Amazon international bestseller, The Sales Game Changer, How to Become the Salesperson People Love. Now, we're going to be covering all of those things in a short moment, Rob. But what I like to do first is just to unwrap your life a little bit and start by asking you, where are you located?
We're located in the United States and in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Fantastic. Now, not knowing much about Utah myself, what is one of the most memorable landmarks in that location?
Well, there's certainly the Great Salt Lake, and the Wasatch Mountains is where people come from all over the world for skiing. And in fact, the 2002 Winter Olympics was held in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Park City. So it's a fabulously beautiful place of the world. And I relocated here 5 years ago from Portland, Oregon, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the relocation and the scenery, the outdoors, the people. It's just a marvelous place.
I think you've wrapped up my next question. What do you love about the place the most? It's obviously the people, the scenery. Do you enjoy hobbies and sports? Do you do much with yourself in that regard?
Well, I do enjoy running. I've taken up swimming over the last couple of years, and I happen to live, though Salt Lake City is the most prominent lake in the area, in the region, certainly in the western United States. I happen to live on a lake south of Salt Lake City that has hot springs, and so I get to swim 24/7, 365 in a hot springs pool.
I'm going green with envy.
Oh, and it snows a lot in Salt Lake during the winter time. In the summer, it's pretty warm, but in the winter when it snows, there's no greater feeling than to be swimming outdoors with nothing but your swimsuit on while it's snowing on you.
Oh, here. I can only imagine. Thanks for sharing, Rob. Hey, Rob, I've noticed that you have a beautiful family. I wonder, are you pet lovers in general?
Well, we are. We've had dogs. We have 3 sons, my wife and I, and we've had dogs throughout our lives together and with our children. So we enjoy that, but and I don't fault you or blame you for asking that question. But sadly, about 2 weeks ago, we lost our pet.
Oh.
After about 15 and a half years, it just became time.
Yes,
so
I've been
it was
there.
one of those decisions that had to be made quite quickly. Anyway, so we're recovering from that.
Yeah, look, all the best in that regard. I know that when one door shuts with a beloved pet, another one will open for sure and certain. Now, I want to wind back even further for you personally. I want to go back to your childhood days. What did you love doing that you can remember fond memories of?
Well, I was kind of a loner as a kid. I mean, I loved people, loved friends. But I really enjoyed alone time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've recently been reading about, and I'll get to that question, but one of the things I recently have been reading about is the pre-modern age when darkness and silence was a part of everybody's daily existence. They didn't have artificial light.
No.
And there weren't streets with a lot of commotion and traffic. And so when I was reading about that, I was thinking, that's what I really cherished and relished as a child. But I grew up enjoying sports. I was never the all-star, but I enjoyed playing sports throughout my younger days. And I grew up with a large family. I had 6 siblings. And there were 7 kids, so I was number 6. And so trying to get attention at that number is really hard. You're not the baby. So I kind of enjoyed comedy and things like that as one way to get attention. So I miss those days when comedians were funny.
Yeah. And life seemed a lot simpler. Now, Rob, you just touched on something I'm really interested in. It's about reading as a child. And I wonder, do you recall any books that had an impact on you as you moved into adulthood?
Well, I do read some religious books pretty voraciously, but there was one secular book that someone introduced me to, which I'm sure not all, if not most of your audience has come across and probably devoured as I did. But it did make an influence on me as a young teen, and that book was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yeah.
It just really rang true to me, and it felt very natural when I read it, as though, of course, this is the way we should all act and treat one another. So anyway, that book, I think, was a good guidepost for me to see where I was doing in my life and what I could be doing a lot better.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Now, this is probably a good segue into asking you, Rob, what was your, or at least the one that you can remember, your first entrepreneurial experience?
Well, my first one was probably when I was a young Cub Scout, and I suppose you know what a Cub Scout is.
Yes,
right?
I was a Cub Scout and a Scout.
Right, so the precursor to Boy Scouts, and so I was probably no more than 7 or 8 years old, and there was a Cub Scout conference coming to our town, and it was a big convention. And I was told that if you could sell tickets to that convention, that the Cub Scout who sold the most tickets got a free 10-speed bicycle. And I didn't have a bicycle, and I thought, man, that sounds really interesting. So I went door to door throughout my little neighborhood and beyond, encouraging my neighbors to buy a ticket to the Scoutcapades, as they called it. Of course, none of these people would ever have any interest in going to this conference, but of course, they saw that this young boy was trying to be enterprising, so they each, bought one ticket, spent $1 on it, and eventually, I got up to a certain level, and then I remember a week before the conference, something happened where it took me off the street, so to speak. I had to attend to some other stuff. And so when they finally announced the winner, I came in second.
Oh, so, got half a point.
Right. So I didn't get the 10 speed. I did get a backpack. That's what they gave to the second place winner. I didn't have means of transportation to get to the actual conference, so I never even attended myself. I was just told, hey, you got second place and we're sending you a backpack.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I learned a good lesson, though. That is, you got to run through the tape, as we say, right?
Yep.
You can't think, well, I've done enough.
Yep.
Because you never know who's doing a little bit more.
They're raising the bar all the time, aren't they? Your competitors, you've got to be aware and alert. And this is one thing I want to do today on the call with you, Rob, is to tap into that knowledge of your experiences and what people should be thinking about. And I guess that's a really good entry into the next question, which was when you experience success, it's nice to be busy, but we've got a finite amount of time on this earth. Do you think it's important to have some away time from business?
Well, I do, but I don't always practice what I preach.
Ditto.
Because I have this insatiable appetite for just doing, because I think I learned this lesson as a young Cub Scout, just doing a little bit more. And so really keeping in mind that, in sports, for example, and you can see there's some sports stuff around me, I live in that industry, not full time, but I live a lot in that industry over the last 30 years of my life. In sports, we have an old saying, which is it's a game of inches, and if you think about your favorite sport, rugby, Australian football, could be, American basketball, baseball, in every game, it can be just a game of inches. 1 inch can make the difference between being the champion and being relegated, to a lower division. And so in my life, because I'm an entrepreneur, I've never had the luxury of relying on a gigantic team or a campus of company divisions, departments, thinking, well, I can take the day off because if I don't perform to my utmost today, someone else will make up the difference for me. So as a result, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, but this is, you asked the question. So I think to a fault, and it is a fault of mine perhaps, I always have viewed the glass as half empty as opposed to half full. Why? It's not because I'm a negative person. I'm a very hopeful person, and hope is what brings me joy. However, I just always recognize that I have to rely on my own resources. I can't wait for anyone to do my job for me. You're only as good as your next sale. You're only as good as your last client. And so I've just never been comfortable resting on my laurels. So as a result, as my wife would tell you, and I'm speaking now quietly because who knows, she could be listening to this.
Guaranteed.
I tend to take work with me on vacation too often.
No.
Yeah. So I know you have a lot of listeners out there, Rick, who could probably give me some good advice on how to turn that around in my life. And I'd be open to that. So that's probably the one area where I need to make improvements. In fact, I don't think it, I know it.
You know what? I like the fact that you're human, because nobody's perfect. And those who present themselves as if they were, they don't come through as genuine and authentic. So, it's a credit to you. Now, I know that you've worked with some incredibly talented individuals across tech, manufacturing, products and services, professional, financial services, media. The list goes on and on. You've had Hall of Famer conversations. The list goes on and on. I could talk for minutes on just that alone. But when you talk to incredibly driven people who are achieving amazing success in their chosen field, do you find that there's a common thread?
I think that's a very intriguing question. I certainly look for it. And sometimes you can't ever really put your finger on it until you stop and consider it. But I think there is one that at least is attractive to me. There are a lot of successful people out there, but you talked about the kinds of people that I like to hang around, the kind of people that I like to do business with. They're obviously successful people, even though I enjoy mentoring and working with people who are starting their career or changing their careers. But I think the one quality that I really admire and that I want to emulate whenever I can is they have a sense of not only personal and self-awareness, but they have a sense of humility as to who they are. They recognize that, but for the grace, they might be somewhere else. And so they had a break perhaps in life. They were in a good environment, a good situation, or they didn't necessarily have any breaks, but because they were blessed with health, with a good mind, with perspective, with good friends, good mentors, good teachers, they've been able to achieve a level of success. And so that is the one thing that I think when people think of celebrities, when they think of professional athletes, when they think of CEO, business titans, they might think of people that, they kind of they have their driver and they sit in the back of the car driving to all of their appointments and their meetings into their office, reading their newspaper, sipping their wine. That's not the kind of person that I am accustomed to being around. I find people who are human, who are fallible, and who recognize mistakes that they've made in their life or in their business. And they're tremendous at understanding what those mistakes were and then having the courage and the discipline to take corrective action.
Humility, courage, and discipline. That's what I've taken away from that little segment there. Thank you, Rob, for sharing.
Sure.
It's powerful stuff. Now, excuse me, I'd love to talk with you about Game Face first and how that came about. I love the name. Why was it that you chose the name Game Face, and how did this organization come around for you?
Well, I began my professional career after university. I actually worked in Japan immediately after university in a role that did not relate to my future career. When I came back from Japan, I was working for the National Basketball Association, but more specifically, I took a job with a particular club called the Los Angeles Clippers.
Oh, yeah.
And in those days, in the early 1990s, it was a really bad team on the court. But they produced some pretty good executives over the years. And so when I took a job, it was in a sales role. I had no aspiration to be in sales. I don't think anyone grows up around the kitchen table being implored to get into sales.
I want to be in sales, Dad.
Yeah, right. So that was never in my purview. However, it was an opportunity to join a club, to join an industry that I never even considered it. But when the opportunity was presented, I thought, that sounds really interesting. I'm not a sports junkie, but I appreciate sports. There are many life lessons to be learned from sports, and not to mention the social good that it does within a community, within a country. Mm-hmm. So that opportunity, when it was presented, I took it. I had some success doing it. The job that I was given. I surprised myself, quite frankly.
Baptism of fire, as such?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was walking on coals every day. But I found some success in that role, got some attention, some recognition from it, and then decided to start my own business. And the business was a sales consulting, a sales advisory role, and mostly a sales training role that I would perform for other sports teams who would hire me to come in and work with their full-time sales team. And for those of you who may not be aware, a sports team does have to sell. It's a sales-driven industry because we have to sell tickets and sponsorship and branding.
They are businesses, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I decided after a few years that I was going to start my own business because of the attention I was getting from it, literally, I was sitting on the floor of my home in my den, and my wife and I were just talking about this new venture that I think I want to start. And as she has done countless times in our marriage, she trusted me and she supported that. And I said, I don't know what to call this thing because I don't want to call it Cornilles, whatever, because my name is hard to pronounce. I think it's not the most attractive name. So
certainly not the worst.
Well, it may be so, but I thought I want my brand to represent something. When people hear it, hopefully they know instantly what it means, right? And they get an image in their mind. Because I think that's half the marketing is if they hear the name, they go, oh, I know what you do, or I know what you're about. And so as I was thinking, athletes, because I'm working mostly in those days in the sports industry, athletes who are really professional, who are disciplined, who are skilled, who have drive, who are determined, who are prepared. That's the kind of business I want to be known for because that's what I'm going to do for my clients. It's like I'm going to help them achieve that same level of excellence. I said, there's got to be a word that sums all that up. And then my smart wife, who's not much of a sports fan back then, she says, game face.
Isn't that wonderful? How quickly that can come around.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful story. That is awesome. Thank you. I sit here and I think to myself, well, the My Future Business audience are a balance between existing business owners, small to medium-sized ventures and the likes, and they're looking for insider tips and tricks. And I think on balance, we've talked about humility. We've also touched on the concept of failure. I'm wondering if you could share with us what you've learned from failure yourself.
I've learned that, ultimately, it's me. I'm responsible for my own failures.
Yeah.
Taking on that responsibility. And once again, I think that's where I think humility comes in. I think self-awareness comes in. And recognizing that, I may have chosen the wrong person to do business with.
Yeah.
I may have chosen the wrong product to purchase, but ultimately that's on me. I should have done my due diligence. I should have been more tedious in my research. Because as one example, I'm not saying that my failures came in hiring people, but just one quick example is that we've often been told that we hire too fast and fire too slow.
Yep.
It's kind of a weakness of most entrepreneurs because you've got a problem that you need solved right now, and you're looking for someone to fix it for you so you can move on to the next issue. And so someone walks along your path and they look reasonable and they look, like a decent person, and they can fog a mirror, and you say, well, that's great. I'll hire you.
Yep.
And then if it doesn't work out, you say, well, that person just didn't have the qualities they told me they had, or that person wasn't a good fit. No,
Yep.
It's my fault that perhaps that thing didn't work, right? That relationship, or so I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from failure is just take responsibility. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at that, but the older I get, the more mature I get, the more I recognize there's no harm in owning up, because I think that's the kind of culture you want to build within your team.
You've talked about due diligence. Obviously, there would be due process. Do you think over time, as you hone your personal skills, that you become more intuitive? Can you feel something when it's happening? Absolutely.
Yeah, that sense starts, that sense becomes keener in you through that experience. And you also, I've learned that you learn to trust that sense more.
Yeah.
Some people, I have a friend who I actually had as a guest on my podcast. He's a well-known Hollywood actor named Glenn Morshower. He's been in hundreds of projects, both film and television. Mm-hmm. And he calls it the whisper. He says we have to learn to hear and then trust the whisper. And so I really like that expression.
Yep.
But I do think your ear gets more tuned into the whisper, the more experience you have, and the more you willingly accept it, as opposed to fighting it. And you just let your intuition take over. Your intuition is probably the most honest part of your soul, and so I've learned to trust that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these insights. They're wonderful. There was a time there, Rob, where I was thinking to myself, do I really trust this person? And then I learned a lot about intuition. So thank you for providing some more clarity around it. Now, we've touched on lots of things throughout the call today. We've talked about how GameFace came about, but I'd love to talk about more of the detail behind GameFace, some of the things that you actually do, because you help both corporates and sports organizations. Is that right? I mean, I don't know how you separate the two, but obviously you do.
Well, a sports organization traditionally in our vernacular is a sports franchise, or in the U.S. A collegiate program. So what we do is our business is about 50-50 right now. 50% sports, and I'd even say entertainment companies.
Yep.
Very prominent brands with a very rabid fan base that one little thing can really set them off. And because they're very passionate about what you do or what you represent, and the fact that you represent their community, perhaps. So there's a real sense of ownership in your brand. So selling in that environment has some real unique challenges, because as a salesperson, say, of the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team, the World Series champion right now, when you're selling for that brand, whether it's tickets or sponsorship or a big suite inside Dodger Stadium, you have no control over the product on the field. And so with that understanding, you still have to be able to persuade and influence the thinkers in the LA community that an association with your brand will be beneficial to them, whether for their business, their family, their personal relationships, and so forth. So it's a very unique sales environment, because in most other sales industries that I've ever been a part of, if the salesperson detects a flaw in the product or in the process, they can usually go to the design team or the engineers or the marketing department and say, hey guys, I've got a suggestion. We need to make a tweak in this, less green, more blue. And they'll take that feedback and they'll improve on the product. But in sports, you can't do that. You have no say in the roster. And you're not going to make calls on behalf of the manager or the coach. So how do you sell in that environment? Whether your team is a proverbial loser or your team is a perennial winner, how do you sell? Because there are challenges to both. And then the other side of GameFace's business is we take those principles, those lessons we've learned working with sports teams, not only on the field, on the court, on the pitch, but also in the front office, in the business office.
Yep.
And we're taking those lessons and we're applying them now to what I call real businesses. Companies, like you said earlier, companies in the tech industry or manufacturing or consumer products and so forth. And so we teach their sales staff how they can be more effective calling on their market, whether it be by phone, whether it be in person, whether it be through Zoom, like we're doing today.
Yep.
So we are an umbrella organization for any kind of sales team, whether for companies or I'd even say for nonprofit organizations that need to raise money. How do they fundraise more effectively? So if you're all about generating revenue, then GameFace could be your advisor and your trainer of your people to make them what we call sales game changers.
There are a lot of fundamentals that I talk about with amazing guests on the show, Rob. What is it that you take from, I guess, is there an overlap between the sports industry and your typical corporate? Is there an overlap of different techniques that you blend together? Is it a very tailor-made experience per client?
I appreciate that question. At GameFace, what we have developed over 25 plus years is we recognize there are certain principles of human interaction, of customer engagement that are universal regardless of industry, regardless of market, regardless of the lifetime of your product or service or even your company. So if you're a startup or if you're a well-established enterprise, so those principles we teach to all of our clients. We train in all of our clients those very universal principles. And then beyond the principles, we have what we call the 7 skills to a successful sale.
Yes, I read about these.
Yeah, so the 7 skills they're generally very similar from industry to industry or market to market, whether I'm working in Australia, whether I'm working in London, whether I'm working in New Jersey. However, the application of those skills has to be adjusted, tweaked because of the nuance of your industry or your standing in the industry or your history as a business or the newness of your product. And all of those factors go into our consideration when we come into your organization and provide you that very customized training program.
Yeah, thank you for revealing that there. I'm looking at your website now. There's a lot of content there for people to get a bit of an idea of the types of organisations that you're working with. Anything from PGA Tours through to ESCO Corporation, tennis associations, and the list goes on and on. Now, I want to talk about your book. You have an Amazon international bestseller, The Sales Game Changer. What was your motivation behind writing this magnificent book?
Well, Rick, my motivation was I got tired of my clients asking me, "Where's your book?" It was obviously, it's a compliment, and I appreciate the compliment. But for years, I was frankly and shameless. I'm a little ashamed of this, but I was so wrapped up in running my business and in getting onto the flight to my next client and trying to produce positive results for them. And I'm not trying to sound noble or anything, but this is just where my mind was focused.
Of course.
And at the end of most of my visits, I would have either, the CEO or the owner of that business or their rank and file sales team would just ask me, "Hey, where can we get, you have a book, right? Where can we get your book?" And so I'd always say, it's coming, right? It's coming.
It's just around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. So blessing in disguise, the pandemic, when it began, its ugly rise a year ago, that was for many of us an opportunity to, quote, stay home. And sure, we could do business virtually like we're doing right now, but it also gave me a chance because many of my engagements, were either canceled or postponed for obvious reasons.
Yep.
So it gave me a time then to say seriously, okay, this is the year I'm going to do it. And so the Sales Game Changer is really, it's been 25 years in the making. It's taking the experience that I've gained in my own sales experience, and also the best practices, and yes, even some of the worst practices that I've seen out there in industry. And I've decided to collect them all and put them in this book and give people a real guide, a playbook, if you will, on how they can distance themselves from the stereotypical salesperson that most people can't stand and don't want to be around, and transform themselves into becoming the salesperson people love. And so I'm really proud of what it's done so far. I was grateful for how many of our clients around the world ordered it immediately to make it a bestseller internationally in its first day. So we're just really, really pleased with it so far, and we still have more content coming out in the next few months.
It's a credit to you. Congratulations. Now, I'd like to ask, Rob, did you find it a struggle? Did the words flow through the pen? And with 25 years experience, was it hard to leave things out?
Oh, to your last question, yes. It was like, you know what? This thing could be 500 pages.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I can imagine.
Because, my tendency, as I'm sure you have as well, Rick, your tendency, your desire is you want to give people the benefit of your experience and your best content, and you don't want to shortchange them. But my publisher kept reminding me, Rob, first of all, no one's going to read a 500-page book.
War and Peace.
And also, there's opportunity to write a second book, Rob. You can always do a second one. So yes, there's as far as the ease by which the information flowed, because I've been doing what I do for so long, and I don't mean to sound as though I don't listen to my clients. Certainly I do, but I'm grateful that I've gotten to a point in my career where I can almost, if you remember the old character Radar O'Reilly on the television show MASH.
Of course, yes.
Where he could anticipate what Colonel Potter was going to say before he said it. I mean, I can anticipate issues or questions that my clients are facing. I still will listen because every one of them has a slight, there's something that makes it very unique. There's some nuance to what they're sharing with me. But anyway, because I've gotten to that point in my career where I can almost anticipate the information as I wanted to share it came quite quickly to me. And so it was written quite fast once I finally found the time and the energy to sit down and get it done.
Thank you for sharing, because I know that there are a lot of aspiring book authors that struggle through this process. So it's wonderful to have people on the show who have actually walked the path before them. Now, I know something else very exciting is happening for you in terms of your masterclass. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, well, to answer the answer to your earlier question is, what do you do when you can't share everything in the book? Uh-huh. Well, that's one of the conclusions I came to, is that I'm going to give people most of my thinking in the book, right? But there's things in between the lines that I wish I could explain further, or that I could alert them to, so that they don't misinterpret, misunderstand, and misapply some of the ideas that I'm sharing in the book. And that's when the idea of the masterclass came about. We decided as a staff that we need to give readers who are really serious about becoming the salesperson people love, give them a chance to go deeper into the content and allow me to be their personal coach as they're working through that process. And to kind of give them a little bit of a heads up as to what's around the corner, or what's beyond the fog, if they're in a situation right now in their career or in their occupation as a salesperson where they don't quite know how to handle a particular situation, or they're anticipating a huge objection, or they don't know how to call on a certain individual that they know could make a big difference for them and their business. So those kind of personalized questions are all handled in the masterclass.
Yes, that's wonderful. I'm sitting here very excited trying to keep myself in control, thinking to myself, well, how do I get my hands on this wonderful book for a start? But more than that, when people want to reach out to you and see if they're a good fit for you, where do they go and what is the process? And also, where can they, obviously they can find the book on Amazon, but can they get it through GameFace directly or?
Well, right now, Amazon is the best way. However, I would encourage them to go to a dedicated website called thesalesgamechangerbook.com. Thesalesgamechangerbook.com. You'll learn a little bit more about me, about the process of the book coming out. You'll be able to order from that site. It will take you to a special link on Amazon. You'll also find that we are, in addition, within the book, we've done something that I think is quite unique. And that is, and you have to understand, again, my nature is I'm a coach, I'm a trainer.
Yeah.
And so when I was writing this book, one of the things that was bothering me was that I was thinking, I want to have a touch with the people reading this book. I want to be able to interact with them. I don't, as an author, I don't want to just give them, here's a two-dimensional piece or document. Do what you will with it.
Yeah.
I want to get their feedback, and I want to help them really gain comfort and confidence in the material. So what we've done, at the end of every chapter, we've included a link to a video where I talk about that content in a little bit of a deeper dive. And I even will test the reader if they want to take the test, if you will.
Yep.
I challenge them with a couple of assignments or exercises to see if they're really understanding and then ultimately mastering the content. So all of that video content is found once you get the book.
Is it part of the book sale?
Yes. So the book is out right now on ebook, on Kindle. Mm-hmm. The hard copy is coming very shortly, in a few weeks. And we're making improvements already from the Kindle version. In the hard copy version, we're making some improvements that I just insist on. And so in either version, whether it's the ebook or the hard copy, you'll get access to that video content, that bonus video, if you will.
Yep.
And that's not even talking about the master class. That just comes with the purchase of the book.
I love what you're doing with the book. You're with your masterclass. You're essentially removing the need for interpretation of the written word. You're creating relationships. You're building bonds, and you're helping people beyond, I guess, the pages of the book. And it's a credit to you. Now, for everybody who's on the call, I'll be making sure to give you all of the links that you are going to need to get your hands on this wonderful book. But when somebody wants to connect with you directly, Rob, where will they go?
Well, certainly go to our website. And you can find information on that. But Rick, I anticipated you might ask me that question, and I got approval to give out my email address.
Okay.
To your audience. So if they'll just email me at RYC, those are my initials, RYC at gamefaceinc.com, gamefaceinc.com, and let me know that they're a listener of yours, that they follow you, and they can put that in the subject line if they want, and I will make sure to get back to them as fast as possible, answering their questions, giving them additional information. If they need to talk to another member of my team, I'll make that introduction, but I would hope that I could be able to speak to them directly, either through email or through phone or Zoom. And the other thing that we're going to be doing with our masterclass, those who enroll, when we announce the launch of that, which is coming soon as well, we're going to introduce masterclass registrants to our network of people that we're working with. And I'm not talking about for job placement. I'm talking about networking with people of similar mind who want to also, like you, want to continue to hone your craft in this industry.
There's some high caliber people in that community. I'm pretty sure and certain of that. And with all that being said, make sure that you find the email below this post. No matter where you find this interview, you will find those links. I'll be making sure of that. And with all that being said, Rob, this has just been a dynamite call full of wonderful content, great conversation. Thank you so very much for joining me on the My Future Business Show today.
Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure visiting with you, and all the best to you as you continue to make an influence on others.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.